morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. And welcome to the JDC West 2016 International Business Case Presentation. Thank you to our judges. We have Gary Vickers from EMCO, Josh Lawson from Scotiabank, Michael Kozar from Federated Cooperatives Limited, Kenneth Coates from Johnson Choyama Graduate School of Public Policy, Wayne Brownlee from Potash Park, and Carolyn Tassad from P&G. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask presenters questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university, and we ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. So competitors, you may begin when you're ready.
All right, so good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephanie, and along with my partners, Nate and Luke, we are Fox Ridge Consulting. And we are very excited to present to you today the recommendation that we have for Granite Aviation Solutions. So to begin with, we do have an agenda provided to you within the notes. Please feel free to follow along with it as we guide you through the steps that we took to come to the conclusion for the recommendation that we have set out for you today. Now, the principal issue that we were looking to address was your immediate need for a decision to be made on the request for your proposals with the company Flight, as well as your interest in expanding into the coordination of selling and supplying aviation hardware to companies. Some issues that followed with this as well is, for example, the unstable environment that comes from these potential contracts in respect particularly to the countries that you would be operating in. Secondly, the engagement and reliance with Flight, which does have a going concern risk in an uncertain future. Now, some of the competencies that we were able to identify within your company itself was, firstly, the superior customer service that you are currently providing to your clients in respect to particularly your senior project partners, which are the ones who are in charge of the projects. You're not looking to use junior level members when it comes to these projects. And secondly as well, your industry knowledge and experience, again, in respect to those project senior level managers. Conversely, some of the weaknesses that we had identified with the company were the overextension of your operations, as well as the limited knowledge that you do have in particular with the flight hardware and services in terms of the actual technicalities of it, operating it, training for it, and the like. Now, taking a look at the environment that you're looking to operate in potentially with these contracts with Flight, politically, there seems to be a lot of regional instability, especially in respect to the countries that you're looking to create these partnerships, contracts with, and as well the governing bodies, for example, the political instability, for example, personalized style of ruling in certain countries, and the uncertainty of rulers that will be coming in the future. Economically, there is, of course, the concern of the global oil issues and as well the currency fluctuations that, as we know right now, can be a very growing concern, especially, for example, with the Canadian dollar. Moving on, socially, there is the social expectations or cultural expectations when it comes to bribes, for example, and the need to do everything when you are operating in these foreign countries, as well as your increased concern for safety when it comes to flying, especially with, as was mentioned, as you had mentioned yourselves, the disappearance of the Malaysia flight. It hasn't led to an increase in concern for safety, ability to track planes, and the like. And following with that, of course, is the demand for your virtual real-time interface on the planes, your ability to track those planes without having to actually retrieve the black box, as they call it. Now, with these facts in mind, we determined 3 decision criteria. The first is stability. So will the recommendation that we provide cement granite to a solid operating foundation? We would expect to see the results in a reduction in concentration risk, which we would identify, for example, in solely placing your 3 contracts with Flygt. Secondly, continuance. So will this preserve your reputation with your existing clients? And we would be able to, or expect to measure this result we would expect to measure this result in your maintenance of your 3-hour turnaround time and the continued use of your senior project managers when you are dealing with your clients. And thirdly, prosperity. So will this grow your top line revenues through your contracting services? We would expect to see this in an increase of over $800,000 within over the next 5 years. So again, these are the 3 decision criteria which are critical in the development of our recommendation and ensuring that your company continues to achieve excellence onwards into the future.
Thank you, Stephanie. So in addressing some of the concerns that you raised, we've come up with 3 different alternatives for you. So I'll walk you through those over the next couple of minutes. So we'll start with our first, the Flygt partnership. So that's sort of been an ongoing thing, and basically what's happened in the last 3 hours is Flygt has come to you and decided that they cannot take on the risks that are posed by the contracts in question, and have pushed that risk to you. So after a careful analysis, we've sort of come up with this recommendation concerning the issues of bribery. So there is some fairly stringent bribery of public foreign officials, as quoted 3.1.8, which the contracts in both Angola and Burundi would potentially violate. So for those reasons, in this recommendation, we would move away from those potential proposals and focus specifically on Omen. Now, Omen's sort of in the legal gray area. There is documentation that supports the additional fees as quoted in Exhibit 9, you can find them in the back there. And so what this would look like is taking on sort of a sales role for Flygt, taking on or buying inventory from them and taking them up on their offer to subsidize the maintenance fees as sort of discussed in the more recently, and sort of taking on the sales and maintenance role and helping them in a proprietary fashion to push their sales forward. The second recommendation that we bring forward moves away from Flygt altogether. So it takes, because of Flygt's sort of instability as an operator, you know, they're posting losses, their going concern is sort of in question. One of the recommendations that we had considered was maybe taking a sales approach and looking for some ways to sort of recuperate the $200,000 in sunk costs that you initially sort of face. And so by doing that, you would take more of a sales approach. So you would look to one of your 30 clients and look to push their products on some of your suppliers, and you do that by sort of assembling focus groups and focusing more on the low-cost carriers. So low-cost carriers on a global level take up about 25%. So there's a lot of opportunity for you as sort of the service industry to sort of bridge the gap and create that dialogue between aircraft carriers and potential suppliers. Basically, it's focusing more on the domestic. There's a lot of low-cost carriers coming to Canada at the moment, and that's sort of, you're operating in a familiar environment and moving forward as such. And finally, we have the L3 proposal. So this moves away from the sales side and it focuses more on the supplier side. So with this recommendation, you'd be looking at securing a contract with one of Flygt's major competitors who does have stable sales, a little bit larger, and being able to sort of take in a substitute product. So the FA 2200, 2300, so it's not hardwired into the plane, and it's focusing on sort of a niche market. And basically you're reducing the concentration risk and the risk of operations with Flygt, and taking on sort of some of the criteria that the customer maintains. So we'll take a look at our alternatives based on the decision criteria and sort of go through it. So in terms of the Flygt partnership and stability, based on them wanting you to take more of a sales function, it doesn't introduce much stability into your operation. So you operate as a consultant and you don't really take on inventory and sell it, and we don't recommend that you move forward as such because that's sort of out of your scope of business as it goes forward. In terms of continuance too, by operating in places where there's sort of some gray legal matters, that might jeopardize future contracts that you have and your reputation back at home, and if that comes, that could potentially wipe out a small firm such as yourselves. In terms of prosperity, the bottom line from the contracts as you provided for us in Exhibit 10 are very attractive, but they're not guaranteed. You're not sure if you're going to get paid and when you're going to get paid by your suppliers, or sorry, by the customers. And taking on that sales role, this introduces a lot more instability into your day-to-day operations. In terms of the sales task force, it doesn't introduce a lot of stability in the immediate. In the long term, it does, but you need to find the product essentially that you need to replace Flight's product with. So it's almost putting the cart before the horse. You're pushing sales without having a product to actually sell. So continuance, you are working with your existing client base and you're helping them to facilitate sales, and so there is, it does meet that requirement. And in terms of prosperity, there might be opportunities for you to work again with your existing client base and make those sales, but in the short term, it's not what you need. So we'll move to the L3 proposal. So again, a targeted proposal with L3. So you're filling the supplier need, you're finding a substitute product that then you can then sell to the low-cost carriers on a regional level. So it meets the stability. You're going with a company that's whose going concern is not a risk and who has a well-respected and well-known brand essentially. And in terms of continuance, you can maintain sort of your current relationship. You might have to consider not working with Flight anymore, but based on the way that things have gone down in the last negotiation with them and them pulling a contract on you where you would have to agree to exclusivity, perhaps pursuing another alternative would be best anyway. And in terms of future prosperity, we believe that L3 is the future to sort of prosperity for you as an organization, and will really sort of catapult you into the forefront of the client service industry in the aerospace in Canada. So for those reasons, we are proud to present to you the L3 proposal.
Now, the impact that the L3 proposal has is that it takes care of these risks and these threats that we've identified and ensures that your company goes forward in a stable manner for long-term success and prosperity. The implementation, so one issue that you brought to us is that you need to get a decision made immediately. So this is your 0 minutes, this is your 10-minute timeline. So after our meeting, we recommend that you refuse these flight contracts due to issues with respect to legality, as well as maintenance, and et cetera. Nate, my colleague here, mentioned that the flight was looking for you to take on more of a maintenance responsibility. That's something that you're not responsible for typically, nor do you typically have the competencies in that area. With 15 people and being responsible as a conduit from suppliers to sellers, there's no reason for you to take on something like this, as well as the threats that Stephanie outlined in those 3 operating environments. Absolutely critical that you refuse these. We're also talking the $200,000 of sunk costs. Unfortunately, the cost of doing business has that title to it. Going forward, if you need to take on these 3 contracts, there's issues with respect to having any sort of revenue at all going forward. With a $2.2 million revenue per year, being able to stabilize that and satisfy that going forward becomes extremely tough if you have legal costs of $10, $20 million per year, which could happen with corruption of foreign officials and bribery. Change of the contract from Flight. Again, the last minute pulling of that and reworking it so that all of a sudden all the risk is on you. As a conduit, typically the risk is associated with issues from supplier to the delivery point, not all of a sudden you taking on some of these things and being responsible for things that you're not comfortable being responsible for. How do we look over the next 6 months? Researching this niche market and the L3 product offerings. My colleague Nate has referred to it here. The FAA 2200, 2300, the MAD-RAS, so this acquisition system. So what it has the potential to do is ensure that it's not hard drive driven, or it isn't hard drive driven. So that ensures that there's a little bit more functionality to it. It can communicate better. And there's also a specific market that they already target that can be developed in Canada here. Preparing the research to approach L3 over the next 0 to 6 months. Again, extremely crucial that if you're going to look at establishing a relationship with a partner such as L3, that you have your research prepared. If you take a look at one of the exhibits, it's the last item on the list. So that's the item that we're targeting here. We believe that we can prepare something, along with your assistance, to get ready for L3 in the launch, and then ultimately leading to future opportunities and prosperity. 6 to 18 months, this is the approach to L3. Now what have you done over the last 6 months? You've identified the market. It's used for helicopters, business aircrafts, unique missions in the military. There's an extremely great opportunity here in the Canadian market. You're operating out of Toronto and Montreal. You already have the connections here. You have a few overseas connections. You can start to utilize those connections to ensure that you're ingraining yourself into the market and penetrating this market further. Establishing the charter of supplier and customer relations. Again, ensuring that what you're expected to deliver and what you're expected to be supplied with is more concretely provided. The whole idea of this implementation is to ensure that Granite stays rock solid. There's an issue right now with the stability of the foundation in your organization, and the essential charter of supplier and customer relations goes to ensure that your relations going forward mean that you can comfortably organize your organization with your 15 people and expanding, and not having to worry about working outside of your comfort zone. The regional market penetration, again, working throughout Canada, working with the military, working with private personnel who are looking for these 4 items. The market's already there. It already exists. There's already product for it. You have the ability to connect suppliers to customers. Let's start doing that. And into the long term, so evaluating after the next year and a half from today, data filtering from customers. Customers are going to look, they're going to see, hey, this is the feedback that we're getting. What can you do with it to give us a better product offering? You can organize this, utilizing your technology, utilizing the technology from your customers, send that to the suppliers. What are they looking for? What are you looking for? And how can you better customize that? Provide the data to suppliers as well for training. So this is an issue that's come up. You mentioned this in our previous meetings. What sort of benefits can you provide to your suppliers for training? And prepare the approach to Honeywell. Now that you're already in works with L3, you serve as a conduit. You're not responsible, or it's not necessary for you to establish exclusivity with the company. You're responsible for connecting A to C, you are B. They can bypass you if they wanted, but they don't want to because they want to come to you.
All right, thank you, Luke. So we're just going to address a couple of risks that have sort of come up and broached with us. So we'll start with the bribery for officials, sort of in Burundi and Angola, and potentially Oman. So based on our analysis, the best way we feel to move away from any allegations of bribery is to not do business in those countries. There is some opportunity costs there, of course, and we'll touch on that in just a moment. But for your organization, the size and scope, it makes more sense to focus on a domestic market, or at least a market that you're comfortable with. Excuse me. So you already have a presence in Europe, you've done business in Asia, and you've done business in South America, and you have an understanding of sort of how those places work. And another thing that Luke sort of touched on is sort of by establishing a list of criteria. So one of our previous clients we worked on had a listing of things that they would only consider doing business with these type of customers, and I think it's important that you sort of establish that to maintain your reputation as you move forward within the industry. The second is the unknown credit of new customers, and again, that's sort of addressed by moving away from flight. So you're asked to take on inventory, which you don't do, and then make the sales, but you're not guaranteed to be paid or paid in a timely manner. So all those revenues that you identified in your cost projections might not be. And that's really important to remember as we move forward, because those are all speculative, and we can't count those, and we should really focus again on sort of what we understand on a regional level. And that also is addressed in flight offloading the inventory and associated risks. They're posting losses, they're hurting, they're bleeding. There's no reason to tie in and essentially take over their sales wing in an exclusive 3-year contract. Their going concern is an issue, and if they're doing poorly, that's going to affect the way that you operate and the way that you can do business. So we'll move on and sort of discuss the financials and sort of the loss projections from turning this contract down, and we'll sort of break down how we sort of come to our conclusion here. So based on the projections that you provided, you're going to lose about $17 million, or not lose, sorry, you won't be able to recognize about $17 million in revenue, and that sounds like a lot, but as we break it down, we begin to understand that those are pretty speculative. So you've sunk $200,000 into the cost so far. In terms of regional costs, you might have saved because of the scope of the operation. It would have been likely that you would have had to establish a regional office. Regional office is going to cost you about $3 million a year. And then there's the associated costs with inventory and maintenance. so another $5 million a year. So you're netting an opportunity cost of about $9 million. However, it is important to remember that the two contracts in Burundi and Angola were contingent on you paying the bribe. As we've already discussed, it's important that you don't. And so you have only could recognize about $4 million from the only contract. And again, with the legality, it's sort of a bit of an issue there as well. So in terms of our financials for our recommendation, just sort of briefly, you are going to post, or you will start making money essentially in year 5, based on our leverage of our local contacts within the military and the LCC. And we'd be happy to provide that with you as we move forward. And in conclusion, the rejection of the current offer is the best way forward for you as an entity and as your company. And it's best if you move forward with the L3 proposal that we provided you with, and we'd be happy to assist you in doing so as we move forward. Now I'd like to open the floor to any questions you might have.
Have you considered conflict dealing with flight potentially on Oman and pursuing L3? How am I going to manage those conflicts?
I think the best way forward is to just move away from Oman altogether. Again, it's an unfamiliar operating setting, and you also have the potential legality issues. They have provided you with receipts, or they said they would, but again, you're sort of blurring that line, and as a service provider, it's essential that you sort of maintain that relationship and that clarity. And so by cutting your ties with flight and moving towards L3, we feel that there's future prosperity in that sense.
Further, you have no competency in that sort of aspect of business in terms of maintaining those things, as well as in that operating environment geographically.
So it feels like a gamble because we're gonna cut and run from our current partner and go try to approach an L3, who's a global company in this market. And do we have any information or anything done in your risk analysis to say whether they're actually in the market for somebody like us, who's a fairly small player in the market ourselves? And we're gonna try and grab a global company in hopes that they have a opening for us. Anything about that in your analysis?
So as a result of our risk analysis, we did identify that they may not be willing to let a little fish swim in their big pond. What we identified though was that target niche. So going forward, it was to try and mitigate the fact that you're not trying to be everything to everyone, that you utilize the contacts and connections that you have and that we have to look into that regional and specific market in order to reduce that risk. It can't be mitigated altogether, but flight also possesses a risk that's much more severe in terms of going concern. It may not be around next year. So it's also time to start looking for new spots.
I'm surprised that you're cautious around the new technology. Flight is a emerging company. Their financial profile is very standard for a company moving into this kind of new area. The upside is really high. And you're suggesting going back to a very conservative, very cautious, backyard kind of approach. Are you not getting up too much?
I don't think so. I think if you look at the way that flight operates and the risks that they're asking you to undertake, they're looking for you to essentially, again, undertake their sales wing, and that's not what you do. You're looking for service contracts, essentially, right? And so in undertaking all those associated costs and establishing, a base of operations within those regions, that's really pushing you to sort of the extent of your region and pushing you outside of where you're comfortable operating. It's not so much playing it conservative, it's hedging your bet. So you're operating more on a local scale because you understand the operating environment, and there's a lot of opportunity, especially with oil exploration and military and reconnaissance up north, and that's a boom that we expect to see in the next couple of years.
So you're kind of presenting this as a bit of a binary choice, but you really only have looked at one option, because you're really, the L3 is completely speculative. You don't know what the size of the market is, you don't know what your profitability is. So it's, the binary choice actually is don't do this, but explore other options and maybe you'll get there. I mean, what you're saying to me tells me that we may not even be in this business in a year's time, because when we assess the risks on the other side, we may be in the same position. Is that a fair statement?
I would say not, again, because you already have the 30 other companies that you do business with, so flight just represents a portion. You posted revenues last year of about $2.2 million, and so I think what happened is when Flight came to you with the initial project, you sort of got caught up in sort of what it looked like on paper, but again, it's really asking you to undertake more than you as an entity should take. Your business as a whole will not suffer, but by taking on Flight specifically, and working in places where legal issues are concerned, and just the going concern of your partner, that introduces a lot more risk into your operation. So pursuing other options is the way forward for you as an entity.
And sort of just to add on to that as well, what we believe was an issue as well was just the fact that within that few hours that you have, they've already come to you with a bit of a disadvantage in the contracts that they're looking to agree with, to set to an agreement with you. So we do believe that it would be best to look at other options in that sense, because again, as my partners have mentioned, that would be delving into something that you are not usually within.